hypotheticals and what we would do if the board changed position or recommendations evolved, things of that nature. So I'll segue to something else here. So we've kind of outlined the challenge that quarantine presents, right? And you've heard stories about kids here or elsewhere who have entered quarantine, or places where they've entered quarantine multiple times. So you get a kid who's home, you have the students' classmates in session, right? So what's the solution for that? And I know a number of you have either personal or indirect exposure to this. Like if a kid, while we were open, had to be quarantined at home, we'd use our IT infrastructure to turn on an iPad, and we'd stream the live instruction from home, or from the classroom to the home, right? Mm-hmm. So one of the discussions we've had with IT is, what if we had to do that on a much wider scale? What if we were open and there were sporadic quarantines spread across perhaps all of our elementary schools, or even all of our schools at once, right? So we have to be able to be prepared for that scenario, because I think until there's a vaccine, we get some good news today on that front, but it's probably quite a ways before it's widely available. So odds are we're wrestling with this for quite a while, right? Mm-hmm. So if your student hasn't been quarantined yet, if we're back in session, it's a foreseeable event that we're going to have plenty of kids in quarantine before this is all done, right? Mm-hmm. So we're at a place where we're able to scale our IT infrastructure throughout the district to be able to support a lot of kids on quarantine at once. So I just thought it's important to be able to say that, so all of us understand it together. Like, we have enough iPads for virtually every classroom in the district to be able to stream instruction if we had a bunch of students at home and a bunch of students in session. So that's another contingency we've prepared for as well as a district. That's very challenging to support, but it's our challenge to be able to do that work. Just like Bridget was talking about the lift that is incumbent upon all of our team to coordinate this stuff. Like, it's not without challenge, but we're always creatively problem solving, just like the rest of you are, to try to figure out how to solve as many problems as we possibly can. I mean, every day it feels kind of like Apollo 13, and you're making the carbon dioxide filter to fit the square hole, and you've just got a bunch of round pegs. But that's the people you have working for you in this district, So when Bridget joined us, I don't think that she knew her primary job would become COVID coordinator, or when Mrs. Mongan agreed to be our high school principal, that she'd spend most of her day facilitating contact tracing, or when Scott Holler signed up to be the AD, that would become his life. But that's where we find ourselves, and there's no use complaining when there's a job to do, right? So that's what it looks like. So sorry, Frank, go ahead.
So you're talking about that iPad use, is that just on the elementary level are you talking about?
So we have it at saturation throughout the district.
So Dan, say, because I know we put this up before, and there are kids doing virtual learning right now, besides going to school for the 2 weeks that they did, or the hybrid. So if a parent now, if we hypothetically open, could they just keep their child at home with the iPad and bounce from class to class?
So Darren, one thing we had to anticipate is the last time the board talked about this, it was a split vote on what to do, right? So it would be negligent of me and my team not to plan for changes, modifications, reversals, right? So we have to be ready for whatever might happen, okay? So when I ask IT, what if we're in a dramatically different situation and we had to change course? And perhaps the board does that before the burden numbers completely recede to where we told the community we would wait to reopen in prior votes, right? What do we do? How are we going to support people? Because obviously there'd be a lot of upset folks if the board changed direction and now they have to adapt to something very new, right? You'd have plenty of people who are happy, but you'd have plenty of people who are upset. As you can see based on the emails you receive or the comments we get, there's great division amongst perspective. Mm-hmm. I mean, if I pick up my phone, I could get yelled at by one person, hang up, pick it up again, and get yelled at for the exact opposite issues in any given day. And all of you have had that exact experience. Like, I think if we're all trying to give an individual exactly what was best for them and their family and what they needed, we could do it, because that's what we do every day around here, right? But when you're trying to meet the unique needs of 6,500 kids, right, the needs are myriad, right? So, okay, back to the original question. If we anticipate a moment where there's a bunch of folks who are like, this is not what I signed up for. Like, I want to stay home until things get better, right? It's my job to make sure our team can support whatever choices are made in here, right? So we said, what do we do for those people? Well, we'd have to be able to coordinate education for them, just like we learned how to do when kids were on quarantine, right? So that's very hard, but the team has to be able to do that if all of you change the position of the board, and we have to support that decision. Does that make sense?
Yep, exactly. Thank you.
Okay.
I have one question. I know one of the speakers today commented about some concerns about connectivity and some problems with, devices. How frequent is this happening, and what's the likelihood if we did, all the people staying home with iPads, is that going to increase? I mean,
so I'm not going to lie to you, Cheryl. Tech problems are everywhere, right? Like, we have no ability to control, other than supplying people directly with Wi-Fi hotspots. Like, we don't know what connectivity looks like in the home, right? Devices break and break down, right? You know how it works here. We try to stretch everything as long as we can, so we don't unnecessarily expend funds on something we might be able to get another year or two out of. So there's going to be tech problems, and there are tech problems right now, right? So that tech center that the folks who participated in public comment this evening are sitting in right now, that's a busy room every day that it's open in this district. And whether it's the operations secretary, the techs, or Director Bennett himself, they're answering phone calls all day, every day. Right. So clear-eyed, like, if the board makes a change that requires greater tech infrastructure, it is absolutely foreseeable that there will be strains on the system. Like, you just have to be realistic about that. Like, our team will do the absolute best they can. It'll be like the earliest days of the pandemic when we were using the tech vans to deliver food and Chromebooks to people's homes throughout the district, right? We'll treat it like a barn raising, but it is not going to be without problem.
Okay.
So, all of these different pieces, right, depend on the availability of staff, right? You can't underestimate that element, right? We have to have staff healthy. We have to have staff available, right? And often, through no fault of their own, they're ending up in quarantine. Or you heard Darcy talk about it when Darren asked the question about businesses. Like, you're in line at the grocery store, you're anywhere. There's just a lot of COVID floating around right now. I mean, my iPhone update last night asked me if I wanted to be notified if my phone got close to somebody who tested positive for COVID. Like, this is the world we're living in right now, right? And I mean, like, it's not going to be easy, but none of this stuff works without our staff. We've had staff throughout this building that you're sitting in right now that have been affected by COVID. That's just going to continue, right? And it's whatever we do, there's going to be hiccups here. I just think it's important to recognize how creative the people in this room have been, like how solution-based the board has been, like how invested you all have been, right? I've heard stories from you as like having to support your grandkids and your kids as instructors and how challenging it's been, right? It's been a lot. But we have to be able to keep people free of quarantine and COVID itself if we expect these things to continue to work. Right. We asked our staff to be virtual instructors this year. I don't know. Some of you know the story. Like, I was a biomedical science major, and I was tutoring little kids in reading, and that's what made me change the career trajectory of my life and decide to become an English teacher, right? But I signed up for knee to knee with kids who needed to learn how to read, right? That's why I chose to do this for a living. Right. And it's no use in complaining when there's a job to do, right? And it doesn't do any good to admire the problem. But the fact remains, we've asked our staff to learn some very challenging things in a very short period of time. And, they're Oak Creek Knights. They did what we asked them to do. They worked their tails off. We built the plan. But all of this depends on people staying healthy. So there's that. And there's one other point I wanted to make before questions and other pieces.
Okay.
Go ahead, Cheryl. Sorry.
Two more questions.
Yeah.
One, how does like the staffing matrix here, how does that affect like the staff that travel between buildings? Our OT, our physical therapists, some of the people that go to different places, how are they like either counted in here? And then also, how is district office? Should we have a line item for like district office or traveling staff so that we have a clear picture of where it's being affected?
So there's plenty of folks who travel, including all of us at district, who bounce
Right.
around quite a bit.
Right.
We've tried to limit that as much as humanly possible because the
Right.
more traveling you have,
Right.
the more vectors you have for
Right.
transmission.
Right.
But you'd see like, okay, so tomorrow, like I have to quarantine for 2 weeks, you'd see me represented on the district line. And we haven't gotten much more,
okay.
we haven't gotten much more granular than that
Okay.
because we have limited groups of people working in different departments. So district kind of subsumes them, but we've been following all the rules that everybody else has to follow. When the health department says you got to quarantine, we do. So
Right. Well, I guess I was looking at if we had a separate line item for them, it would help us like see maybe, like, okay, if we've got, X number of people out of district office and those are the people that we've been like sending out to sub in places, that really soaks up any resources that we have.
it would be hard to code it that way.
Okay,
But when I
okay.
said before, you'd have to give us some operational authority to make those choices. Like
Okay.
if Bridget, myself, and Director Hamblin were looking at the scorecard here, and it's like, all right, we've got everybody we can deployed. We're stretched as far as we can stretch. One more case that we can't fill means that we can't maintain standards anymore. There it goes. So there's some operational choices that we'll have to make, which you've empowered us to make on a variety of other issues over the years. Team's highly capable of doing that. So
Okay.
I'll say one more thing before we kind of transition out of this and do some more Q&A. I take a lot of calls here at District, and it doesn't get any easier as the years go by. I had a mother call me a couple of days ago, and this one hit pretty hard. She had a medical procedure done, right? She has 2 young kids in our district, and she said, "Share the story." I said, "Okay, well, her mom is older, right, and was doing her very best to watch the kids, but isn't super tech savvy, and it turned into like a really emotional, overwhelming, challenging experience for everybody involved. And the mom said how much she appreciates the safe and structured place that we provide with limited instruction, and how it's so valuable, and how they need it so much in their family. And all I could do was listen, right? And I know a lot of you have had that experience too in your own homes, and you want to do everything you can to help people. And I said, "Ma'am, we're going to keep working as hard as we can to try to figure this out. And we don't have a state or a federal playbook, but that's not an excuse. We have to figure out what we can do with our own 2 hands right here in front of us." And we have to remember that not all of our kids have someone at home all the time who can provide direct knee-to-knee support. I've spent enough time working with kids in really challenging circumstances to know firsthand what a lot of their experiences are. And I think about them every time we have one of these meetings, and we have to make choices that affect 6,500 kids. And when I send an email, that email goes to roughly 13,000 people who are listed as parent or guardian, right? So you've got 20,000 people or so affected by some of the choices we make. And the gravity of that is that behind every one of those email addresses that our updates go to is a mom like this, or a dad like the fellow who came in and spoke to us about the risks inherent in the choices you're all making. And the only reason I bring this up is, it's like so many other things, right? You just look at everything in front of you and you try to do the best you can. And I know that that's what all of you are trying to do as a team here together. And that's what I ask of every teacher who works in this district, and every support staff member and delivery driver and custodian, and every person that calls himself a knight. So it doesn't get any easier, but I applaud the hard work that everybody's been doing, the commitment of our staff, the dedication of the board. And I think of that mom every time we try to come up with a new creative solution, or any number of the other parents who have called me as these weeks and months have slipped by and the days have blended one into the next. So I just wanted to close with that point. So metrics, tech, challenges, all kinds of stuff, but I'll answer any questions, or the full team's here to answer any questions too. So
I'd like to pick up from there, because one of the things I wanted to talk about, I think, dovetails nicely with your last statement, which is about providing support and intervention for any students or families that are particularly struggling. So I know we've definitely received some messages from families that, virtual is just not working out for them, and it breaks my heart. And I want to know, what are we doing, for them, and how can we help them while we work through larger scale solutions. And I was talking to a teacher in another district about their something that they're building in their district that sounded really interesting to me, which is like creating this idea of intervention teams for targeting students. And this is particularly at a middle and high school level, but that seems extra important as an age group right now, since it's become clear that it's going to be a little more difficult to safely get them back 5 days more quickly. So I wondered if there's already something like that happening, and if we could talk through what support services are available, or what do teachers have the freedom to do in terms of bringing kids into the building, maybe that for specific support, and then how can we build on that if we find ourselves in a position where virtual for those upper age levels continues longer than anybody would like.
I'm going to ask Assistant Superintendent Katarek to give us just a general overview of some of the stuff that's available. And I would recommend we revisit this topic at a little more depth at a subsequent board meeting, just because of its critical importance, in particular, like how we could continue to share out some of this stuff and make our resources more and more visible to families who are struggling right now. So, two-part answer, but I'm going to ask Bridget to weigh in here right away.
Yeah, that's my pleasure. Thanks for bringing up that question, Leah. So I want to continue to applaud our staff, because amid some of their own interpretation about, thank you. So in spite of some of our staff's own trepidation about working at this time with a high burden rate, they are still keeping students at the forefront of their concern. And so at the building level, student intervention teams are still continuing to meet and look at data such as attendance. So virtually, are they logging on? Are they engaging in the classes? Are they making progress? And so they're still looking at all that information as they would if we were in person. And at the building level, they're working together with counselors and social workers. I hear of staff going out and making home visits to check in on students who haven't engaged in learning. I know at the high school, they're using some of their student data regarding engagement and progress to work one-on-one with a few students. So at the high school, they're working with some of our most at-risk students who are not making progress toward earning credits. We've had recent conversations at the middle level about more closely reaching out to our students who are English language learners to see how we can connect them more closely to their EL teachers and school staff. And so our staff are recognizing that this, for many students, is a challenging educational model. And so they're working together as a team to see how can we continue to reach out and make human connection with them, first of all, because many of them have great relationships with kids, and that reconnecting some of those staff with students is helping kind of keep those students move along. So that's kind of a big picture summary of some things that we see and hear is happening. And so the staff are really kind of going out of their way, recognizing that it's, challenge to bring a lot of people together, but how can we still connect with some of those kids and families who are struggling the most.
I echo Leah's comments. That was actually something I had written down as well. And I like the idea of it almost being a standing item here. We know, as of tomorrow, we're not going to have every student back in school 5 days a week. And obviously we want to work towards something like that. But, what are we doing and what additionally can we do to support the families? I applaud the parents, that spoke tonight about their own experiences with their children, the open communication they've had, about the struggles that they've had. It's real. It is. And as Dan, like you said, we're trying to weigh 12 different things that we all feel are important and trying to decide, what weight to give what. Obviously mental health, social and emotional well-being, is really important, and I think we need to highlight for families what's available if people are not aware, and we need to look at what additionally we can also do for additional services, changes to structure, whatever it might be, to continue to support.
No, so we're back here the 23rd, right? So we'll belabor that point in a little bit more detail, regardless of what's on our agenda. So.
And I know I had the opportunity on Friday to sit in with the high school on a Zoom meeting regarding social and emotional learning and what they're doing. It was an amazing in-service that they did and talked about some of the concerns they had regarding suicides and things of that nature, and what they're doing and how they're helping teachers to kind of watch for signs and symptoms and what they can do. There's some excellent information that was a part of that I've talked with one of the guidance counselors about, seeing if we can get that information out more into parents' hands. And this was specifically looking at high school, but I know it's an issue that we need to look at our middle school and our elementary as well. So at least we can give some parents some more tools to watch for if their kids are having specific issues. Again, encouraging them to call their counselors and things of that nature, or seek out some of the resources. But it's hard because the resources that are available in the general public are a horrible waiting list, and it's only growing because of this. So, but it was a very good in-service. I was really, really nice.
Obviously, that's really important to the high school, middle school, and elementary, but we also got to present it to the special ed. It's what they're going to too. So there's strong emotional and social issues there that parents could utilize in having those conversations. So, any other questions, comments?
I guess more just of a statement, hearing that there is capacity to technology to start looking at, what we would do at a school level to allow people to look at having kids in school or continue to stream from home. Obviously, it's a bigger conversation than, what we've just had. Looking at how you quarantine school-based dashboards. I want to continue to have that conversation as possibilities to get kids back in school, and I want to continue to also look at if those are opportunities and we're able to give families more choice, what we put in place to support our teachers as well. And they were given choices at one point and made decisions based on some choices we made, how we can move forward with some of those strategies and possibly still support the teachers as well.
Any other comments?
I've got a few. I guess the conversation's been going around at the table here on all different issues, but I guess the best way I can think of myself to move forward, and I guess I'd like to first make an opening statement. that if nothing else we do here, everyone's got to keep in mind this one thing. If nothing is ever tried, no progress will ever be made. So we can sit here and talk about things all night long, but we have to be willing to try some stuff to move the ball forward. And until we get to that point, talk is cheap, but it's got to be followed up with solid action. And first, I guess, in the general part of it, we have to decide which numbers we're going to pay more attention to versus other numbers that are out there. So I kind of jotted down three things. We've got the county numbers, city numbers, and our school numbers, and how much they should weigh individually into what decision we make when putting the kids back in school. And I guess everyone can look at it a little bit different, but I kind of thought that the school numbers themselves should be at 50% of our decision making, because they deal with the students and our teachers, of course. But when you look at the city numbers, looks at the whole city as a total population, no matter what age group you are or what the demographics of your health issues and everything are. And then you go to the county level, that spreads it out even more. So with emphasis on moving things forward, I think we have to put more emphasis on our own house, I guess is the way to put it, instead of putting more weight on the city and the county numbers. Everybody knows in the room here, I guess, that the city's running the day camp programs, and that has students already in school with whether it's instructors or aides or whatever. So there are a certain number, even though it's a smaller number of students in a lot of our buildings already. So to expand on that, especially at the elementary level, I know there's risks to putting our children back into school. I realize that. But going back to my opening statement, if you don't try to do something, nothing is ever going to happen. And myself, I would like to see some type of a transition back into the phase 2, whether it starts a couple weeks before Christmas with the elementary kids, to see how the numbers really come out when you go in a face-to-face metric again. And I think when we did it the first time, we see the numbers went up, and I don't think anybody in the room here panicked, but everyone wanted to make sure that the right decision was made. But now we've backed off into the virtual for 3 or 4 weeks, and not that it's time to go back 100% tomorrow, but I guess you've got to look back and see what we learned from the first 2 weeks in school and try to get the kids back in and learn from the stuff that didn't work, move forward again for a couple weeks before the Christmas break. And I would no doubt that there's going to be some more glitches and a few more mistakes and a few things that got to be corrected, but that goes back to the opening statement. If you don't try different stuff, you're never going to find the perfect answer to any of this ever. There's never going to be the perfect answer, but every time you go back into school, you're going to find different things that work, different things that you tried didn't work, so you get rid of those, and sooner or later you're going to find something that everybody can live with, and it might not be a perfect scenario, but you're going to find something that everybody's going to be able to live with. And I did suggest to Dan a couple of weeks ago something that where it relates to high school and middle school level to, I guess, cut down the rolling average of quarantines. And my suggestion, and I don't know if there's any merit to it at all, but would be to try something along the line of 2 weeks in school followed by a week of virtual. That way, your rolling average of quarantines doesn't blow out of proportion, because even if you have people out on quarantine, they'd be out on quarantine with a week of virtual. So instead of being out for full 2 weeks of regular school, they might be out for 4 days or 3 days or maybe even a week. And then you'd be right back in. The same goes with staff. But I'd like to see us try at least transition some of our grade schools back in, especially when there was some of them, when we tried this the first time, that had very low instances and very low quarantine levels. We had 1 or 2 schools that didn't have any. So, I mean, it's something that, and that goes back to every time you try it, you take out the stuff that doesn't work, you stick with the stuff that does work. Sooner or later, you get a plan that does work. But we've got to keep trying different stuff, or you'll never get to that point. I guess that's all I've got to say.
So that, Mark, kind of considering what you're saying there, I like to start with the elementary student and make a motion to have face-to-face learning effective November 16th using the individual school dashboard. So we don't flip-flop anymore. We don't close the school district anymore. If we have a quarantine, for example, we have 3 school, let's just say in 5th grade at Shepherd Hills, for example, and they have 3 classes. And one of the classes, one of the teachers or 1 or 2 students, God forbid, become positive or quarantine or whatever, or staffing, like Dan was saying. We close the class. We don't close, or we close the class, excuse me, right? Or if the school has a big outbreak, we don't have enough subs in that school, for example, Shepherd Hills. Sorry, I'm not picking on Shepherd Hills, it's just on my mind here, but then we close down Shepherd Hills for 2 weeks. But we don't close down the whole district. I go try with what Andy said. We had, and I forgot the numbers, Andy, but I apologize. We had 297 people, but when we looked at that, the dashboard, when we were open, and we were hybrid, and elementary was fully in, the elementaries were actually doing pretty well. And it's funny, we've been closed for 2.5 weeks, possibly 3 weeks, because we had a couple of days off. And the burden rate still goes up. So school is not the only factor, obviously, on this. So with this motion, I'd like to recommend with that motion what Dan said is the parents who wants to stay home because they might have immune systems or just nervousness of obviously, and I totally respect that, what's going on with the COVID situation in the city of Oak Creek and parts of Joint Franklin, then let's utilize that iPad and let them have the right to stay home. But the parents that want their kids to go in school, let them go to school. I'm really concerned about the social emotional issues for these kids. A couple of people that were here this evening, have been here for multiple times. And I've been getting emails and calls from other parents, including my own kids, that the emotional and social issues are increasing so bad. And it's nothing against these teachers because they're working their tails off. And thank you for how hard you are working, every one of you. But we have to, I agree with Mark, we got to move this rock up a hill. And these elementaries, I think of and I apologize, Darren, but I think of the words that you were saying, and actually, Mark, you said it personally with your daughter, Darren, and Mark, I think it was your granddaughter, if I'm wrong, I apologize, but struggling to get an iPad, it took 4 days to figure out a mute button. It was a horrible experience. And unless you have kids in this district, you have no idea when they're by 11:30, 12 o'clock, and they're sitting and playing video games because they're done with done teaching already. I'm sorry, but these kids need to be in school. Now, I do understand there's this safety issue that we got to follow. I understand, but these elementary students, I'm recommending to make that motion. And so, is there a second?
Are you recommending make that motion with the site-based dashboards that Dan had explained earlier?
Correct.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, discussion. We'll go right down the line. Please be respectful. Mark, you can start.
Frank, we've had a couple of requests over the last couple of meetings that we let people kind of discuss as they kind of want to versus the forced around the circle.
Yep. So anybody wants to talk about it?
I've got one little thing to add about some of the things I talked about before. My oldest daughter works poison control in the city of Milwaukee. She's been there for about 8 years. And I asked her if she could get me some figures. This relates to the mental health, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, and everything else that's going on because of the COVID thing here. Last year, for the whole year, they had 1.6 million calls. This year, as of October 1st, 2.4 million calls. So that tells you what the real toll is with what's going on out in the neighborhoods here, whether it's in Oak Creek or Franklin or South Milwaukee or Milwaukee, the whole state of Wisconsin, because she covers the whole state of Wisconsin. So that should tell you how serious this really is, and it begs to the fact, I guess, I know we're only one little school district in the whole state, but again, if you don't try pushing that rock up the hill, like Frank said, we're never going to get anywhere. You got to keep trying stuff till we find something that works.
I do have additional comments on that. And I'm just starting with elementary. Obviously, I want to comment about middle school and high school also. But working parents are struggling. Elementary students are struggling with virtual, and I said emotionally and socially. Elementary teachers reached out to me that virtually is very hard, and they want to see their students. Special ed is in person, and it's going well. I have talked to multiple special ed parents. Oak Creek camps, I know we're maxed at 30. I know we have a couple, obviously, that I think you said so many numbers, Dan, but that's going well. Salvation Army is open. St. Matthew's is open, and Grace Lutheran is open. Now, Darcy's not on the line, but I did ask her that question, but she answered it, that they're still open. So, Franklin High School, I know, was told that it's closed, and 2 of the elementary, but it's for 2 weeks. Muskego, Franklin, Cudahy is still open. Today, South Milwaukee just announced they're going hybrid. Starting, if I'm correct on this, November 16th. Unfortunately, it may be sounded, but elementary schools are really childcare for our parents. It's a facility. Another factor is that in this city, surrounding cities, we can't accept any more children. I've been hearing about this every day. Our Oak Creek camp is filled. So what do these parents do with that work? 5 days a week, 40 hours. Our Oak Creek and Franklin families are going elsewhere for daycare and schooling. I had parents that reached out to me just today saying they're moving to Muskego, Whitnall, McGuanago. That hurts me. I'm concerned about the mental social issues which is arising every day. We understand that we're going to have closures. We're going to have closures. We're going to have quarantines. But we don't have to close the district. And that is why, again, I'm starting with the elementaries and we can keep having those conversations. I like the dashboard because it is our footprints are in those buildings. I'm not disrespecting the burden rate. I'm not disrespecting the positivity rate. But when we were open, I looked at those dashboard numbers. Yeah, we had it. And trust me, I want all the numbers to be 0. But my big concern is these kids are behind. And then I look at our proficiency. I worry about our test scores. I think about the high school. I worry about these ACTs that they're coming up. These seniors and juniors are fighting for scholarships. It's really hard to do that virtually. How does my daughter, who's in biology, how do you do a lab over virtually? It's not a great experience. So
Can we try to focus this on the motion?
yeah, that is the motion. So
High school and junior high is not.
Yeah, I know, but this is part of what I'm just saying. So we're playing sports. Thank God. We have extracurriculums. Thank God. Because what are we going to do with these people? If we keep them virtual, they're going to be in a box. These elementary kids are going to be in a box all year. And now we're going into winter. And so it gets even more. So what do these kids do in the winter? So that's why I'm obviously a fan of starting in face-to-face, utilizing the dashboard, but which Dan created. So thank you, Dan, for that. And but using the iPad, so that's the parents that don't want to come back to school, want their kids back to in person. Utilize that, but the parents that do want them, again, repeating myself, then they should be able to come in.
All right, so the motion on the floor, Frank, could you repeat it for us, please?
I'd like to move to return our elementary students to face-to-face learning effective November 16th and utilize the individual SCUDA data dashboard for those schools to determine the phase of instructions. What I mean is also the addition of using the iPad for that parents who choose to keep their parents or the kids at home have the ability to do so, and the parents that want their children to attend school have the abilities also.
And that'd be giving the district the right to do what they have to do on that site-based dashboard to move the staff around and get the school to keep it running.
As best we could, Darren.
Yep, that's all I'm asking. Okay. I'll second that motion.
I would like to make a comment.
Yeah, discussion, go ahead.
Yeah. My concern with that is that my biggest concern is that would mean we would be going against the recommendations of the health department. And these are the experts. And I don't think with our burden rate at 1075, I don't feel comfortable at this point in time. And based on information that we got, that it could, and based on the numbers that we even saw today was 110, I believe it was. And that's, I think, our highest that we've had so far in Oak Creek. So I don't feel comfortable. I'm even concerned that our burden rate is going to go even higher. Darcy said that she is recommending that people stay within their families. I understand that there are schools that have decided to not go with that. Whether they're smaller, and that's the reason why, I don't know. That's their issue, not mine. So I don't agree with that. And I think when we talked about some of these other things before, we with our burden rate before, we said things weren't so bad in the schools, and I agree with that. But our burden rate was much lower. So I'm just worried that we're going to take and come into school, start back to school, and within a very short period of time, we're going to be closing. And so then our kids are going to go flip-flop back to, parts of them are going to have to flip-flop back to virtual learning. The common theme I have heard from pretty much all sides. I've heard it from teachers. I've heard it from parents. Even the parents that say they want their kids back in school at no matter what, is they want consistency for their kids. So I don't feel that at this time we could have that. We couldn't have that for that consistency for kids. I feel like we're going to be playing things. Even I've talked to families that are in Franklin, and their kids, even though they've been open, a lot of their schools, they've had to be quarantined, so their kids are flip-flopping back and forth. So I mean, it's a lousy thing all the way around. I do like the new dashboard. I would be fine with that. I would totally agree with that. So those are my pieces. Thank you.
Well, Cheryl, too, regardless of what happens with any vote, we'll keep working on the dashboard and bringing you back iterations to look at.
Yeah, I'd like to ask, sorry, just a question about what are you proposing then would be the deciding factor to close a school? If you're going to do it school by school and starting with the elementary, what, there's nothing in your motion that talked about what would close it.
Well,
Dan already talked about that.
Dan already talked about it. So Dan has, if Dan says, and I'm wrong, Dan, please tell me. So if Shepherd Hills doesn't have enough staff, we're notified saying we're going to have to shut down Shepherd Hills for 10 to 14 days just like a normal quarantine. And then but the rest of the school is open, the district wise.
Okay, well, you just didn't clarify that in your motion, so I just wanted to make sure.
Well, that's what he already said it, so I just assumed that's why I used that.
So earlier in the meeting, like when I was describing this dashboard, I wanted to give the board like in studying other districts' site-based dashboards and thinking about what operationally would be required. What I described before is a staffing-based dashboard. Right. That's kind of what you see in other places that have done it that way. So the decisions would all hinge on whether or not we could maintain safety standards. So for example, like if Forest Ridge, for example, if this was to happen, they may not be able to open on the day Frank prescribed just based on their current state. Like we'd have to tonight or 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, immediately begin the calculus of figuring out how this would work and communicating all of this for the rest of this week. For Monday the 16th.
In the case that we did have that scenario, wouldn't it be kind of a switch flip? I mean, it wouldn't be something that would change slowly over time necessarily. You'd either have the staff or you wouldn't, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not like a color coding thing that we'd be able to watch and say, okay, well, maybe next week we're going to have to close, because you just never know.
Yeah, no, it would not be slow and gradual. It would be immediate and like right now, right? Like
and then in the case that a school had to close because of staffing, there would be no camp alternative.
No.
There would be school is closed, everybody goes home. You're going to learn virtual for 2 weeks. I hope you have a scenario set up for you to cover this at a moment's notice for the rest of the school year.
Right. Well, because we couldn't use any of those staff to run any camps. We'd be using every single person we had spread out across the district, redeployed on a daily basis. Like that's what would have to happen.
But all due respect, Hill Creek Camp is only 30 people. It's not really doing much.
300.
But it's not enough to cover. We have a waiting list from here across the street.
No, I didn't say. I'm just saying.
I know, but then normal life is everybody's quarantined, right? And so everybody's quarantined. I get a call and I go to work one day and I'm all of a sudden I'm positive, or I was next to someone that's COVID. I'm going to be quarantined for 14 days.
Frank, we have to be able to talk about it.
I know. I'm just explaining it. So.
I just think the point that Leah's making is that the notice would be very short.
Yeah.
Which we all have to be very realistic about that. That's the case. You'd have less than 24 hours notice, probably less than 12.
I would equate Leah's scenario to us waiting for a snow day, but without having a forecast. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden it just happens.
But it's a 2-week snow day.
Yeah. But it's a 2-week snow day. But I'm meaning the timing of notice is immediate, but without a prediction coming.
I want one other quick thing that piggybacks off what Cheryl said earlier, which my concern with this is also the consistency that's required for effective learning environments. So one of the things that we've heard repeatedly from, as Cheryl said, from everyone, but specifically from teachers, is that the most important thing for them to have an effective relationship with their student is to have some consistency in the learning model. And one of the things that they've expressed is that that the potential of that disruptive flip-flop of in-person back to out-of-person, while it's not guaranteed that would happen, it might not happen for some classes. I think we have to keep in mind that the data that we have so far shows us a consistent sharpening spike trajectory in the risk that will happen. Since the third week of September, the burden rate has increased 140% every week. So we have to assume that it's probably going to increase 140% for next week as well. And what I'm just saying is the risk is still growing. I saw a statement from some parents in Franklin She said, my son was scheduled to go back in person this Monday after having his third quarantine for being a close contact to another student. He's missed 6 weeks of school since the school year started. My daughter is finishing up her second quarantine. That's 4 weeks of missed classes for being a close contact. Neither of them have ever been positive. So we're talking about kids who are, they just go to school. They go to school, they get a couple days in school. They get marked as a close contact. They get sent home to quarantine for a couple weeks. They go back to school for a couple days. They get sent home for 2 weeks. And that has to be really stressful for both students and teachers who are trying to provide a consistent learning environment. And while I agree wholeheartedly that we are going to have to figure something out for elementary students, especially before 350. I'm not married to 350, but I think we need to figure out when we can do this idea that I think is a good one. I have a couple of slight modifications I would suggest, but overall, I'm on board. I just think that we should do it when we have some confidence that we can maintain it with some control. I don't want to feel like I'm throwing a bag in the wind and watching it blow around and hoping it doesn't hit the ground. I'd rather wait until the wind dies down a little bit and I can set the bag down on the ground and go, it'll stay there for a few minutes. So that's kind of where I'm at. I love the idea. I'm dedicated to getting elementary kids in as soon as we can do so and feel like it might actually work out for a while. And I'd like to just wait until we see this sharpening spike take a turn.
Can I follow up a little bit? Just sorry to, go ahead, Janie, go ahead. I'll wait.
Like normal, I have a bunch of notes scribbled, which are in no specific order and probably are going to sound all over the board. I kind of wanted to just do what sounded really good, what maybe I didn't agree with, and maybe what I still kind of want to see tweaked. I think kind of similar to Leah, I like the idea of giving parents a choice again. I think a lot of parents felt like at one point, before the school year started, we had some choices and we made the decision to remove those choices. I like going back to a model where if you are comfortable, great. And if you are not, you're not, and you can make that choice for your family. I as well realize I can't be married to 350 forever, or I don't think we will have kids ever back in school. But at the same time, I feel like it's gone up and it's gone up and it's gone up and it's gone up. And so to say at 4 something we were going to pull kids out of school and now it's 1,075 and I should send back, I as well would like to see at least that we've rounded a corner and are maybe moving back in the other direction, even if it's not back down to 350. I think from a contact tracing perspective, I don't know if it was said out loud, but talking about rather than who in your classroom were you closest to, shutting down an entire classroom if someone tests positive, so they're kind of all together or all at home, at least some consistency, in the group that they're with. Besides the dashboard, just with staffing, I guess I would like to also look at some type of a school dashboard for percent positivity. If you have enough teachers available, but you have 75% of your school positive with COVID, and I know that's, you have to kind of look at what the positivity there is as well, even if you have enough staff. I'd like something else with the school dashboard. I think the date, not only for me because we haven't kind of turned a corner, seems too soon. I also think if we're going to get a message out to families to give it some thought, make a decision, get back to the district, give teachers some advance notice for this is how many you might have in class, this is how many will be at home, and how are you going to do that? I don't think we could do that by next Monday. I think families may need to, or looking at, is there a commitment that
that families make so that teachers don't have a different number of students in person and at home every single week. And my last point being teachers with a big question mark. I don't ever want to speak for anyone. Not every teacher feels the same way. Not every parent feels the same way. But I think most of us got a survey today that had gone out to teachers, and there was like 30 out of hundreds that said they were comfortable in being face-to-face with students right now. And again, that's not going to be a deciding factor, but it's a lot to ask of teachers as well. And I want to make sure that they can appropriately teach kids at home and teach kids in person and give both groups the attention that they deserve so that one group's not feeling like they're getting a different level of education. And these conversations have to happen quickly, and we can't spend weeks and weeks and weeks trying to figure out what that looks like. But I feel like there needs to be a little more time to determine, kind of what that looks like. I feel like the teachers are the one group in all of this then that wouldn't have as much of a say. We would give families an opportunity to choose how do we, and can we then give teachers some opportunity. So that's my long list of rambling.
I can piggyback off of that, Jane, because your comment about, and I think Frank did actually mention the idea that a class would go, like if there was a positive test, that the class would quarantine together. I want to clarify that just a little bit, because I was able to, Dan was kind enough to send me the scenario guidance for schools and staff. It's a table of that I think Bridget probably lives by, breathes it. Hopefully with a mask on. And it lays out what happens if there's a positive case with a student, what happens if there's a positive case with staff, close contact student, close contact staff, and it goes on and on. Lots of things. I would amend, or I don't want to make an official amendment yet. I just want to throw out there that this document could be edited slightly for this proposal that I think we're all kind of kicking around here for elementary, to go back full 5 days, in which 1A and 1B, which is there is a positive case, would among a staff or students would be kind of folded together, so that if a teacher of a classroom of elementary students tests positive, it's understood that the class is the close contacts and not a contact trace 6-foot assessment of who was in the front of the class and who was in the back of the class, and then so that there's just an understanding that close contact of a student or teacher when they were in school means the whole class cohort, including aides in the room, whoever was in the room that day. And then the action steps for those two steps could be folded into or combined essentially, so that you always do the same thing, whether it's a student or staff, so that you're capturing the whole class. And this would be a lot more clear if you all had this document, which
It's linked in the situation report for people who want to know what Leah's talking about. It's a very granular document we use at central office to figure out who's all the many different hypothetical scenarios that we've encountered with COVID. So it's pretty detailed. Yeah.
So there's a document we could edit should we move forward with this style of running our elementary schools specifically. It doesn't work as well at the higher levels due to the cohorting, but
I'll note too that if you add this as a standing item going forward, then we can continue to discuss exactly how that would evolve too. So.
I have talked to teachers and a principal from another school that offer this to parents to have that option. And it has become a logistical nightmare. I will tell you that having these teachers trying to do both virtual and in person at the same time puts an added stress on those teachers. And, we're concerned about the teachers, we're concerned about the parents and the students. I get that, but I think we're setting them up for failure by allowing that if we do allow them to go back in person in elementary, I think offering them that option of staying home, I really think we need to seriously think about that, because that could be a logistic nightmare for the teachers.
I think, Amy, logistically, it's going to be really serious. The only reason we shared it with you tonight is in case the board made substantial modifications like this. The feeling was there's a lot of people who have made life decisions based on prior board votes, right? And if the board, for example, voted to return full face-to-face for every kid in the district next week, Monday, we'd need to have an alternative solution available for the people who would take issue with that choice, right? So logistically, it would be very challenging, but it's all we had. Like that district you described, or other districts around the state, it's the only thing they have to offer when changes like this would be made quickly and people would have to respond to them. So your point's well taken, and we're clear-eyed about how hard it will be to support.
Yeah, they told me very clearly that in hindsight, had they known what they know now, they would have never offered it at the beginning of the school year.
And I agree, Amy, that I think it will be very, very difficult, but without some other concession, I struggle with saying, we said 350 at one point and we're at 1075. And again, I don't have to be married to 350, but,
we anticipated, to your point, like just in our team
it's a give and take.
discussions.
If I give up this, then I'm taking this,
In our team discussions, we figured that if the board did anything that exceeded that 350 line, there are people who, the regional health officer came in and said 350, right? So anything in excess of 350, we wanted to have something to offer, right? That's the one thing we had to offer, right? Because we figured there'd be plenty of folks who aren't comfortable until it falls within the range that the health director gave us. So that was just what we came up with.
Yeah, so I just want to excuse me a second, Leah. So I'm just saying, is you disagree that if a whole class was quarantined, you said it's going to be hard on the teacher?
No, not if the whole class is quarantined. We were talking about offering an option for students to be able to stay home if the parent wants to have them stay home rather than going back in.
That came from Dan.
So hang on, let me clarify, just so we're all calmly explaining and talking about exactly the same thing, right? So when we were in hybrid for those couple of weeks, there were plenty of kids throughout the district who were quarantined for periods of time. What we did is we allowed, that kid had to continue to learn, right? So you set up an iPad station in the classroom, right? We did this in some rooms, right? Where a kid was at home learning and the iPad was up in the room. Like, it's not the same. It's not ideal, but it allowed the kid to continue to learn without the teacher having to provide two completely different platforms of instruction. So we did it on a relatively small scale for those 3 weeks. So what Frank proposed, as I understand it, would be basically anybody who wants to take advantage of that option would have to notify us in the next 3 or 4 days or something like that, that's what they were planning to do before the 16th. And that may very well amount to between 0 and several hundred or 1,000 people. So we'd have to figure that out.
One thing I'd like to suggest, if we're going to go that route, is that we bake into our decision some guidelines for that. I mean, just open-ended, parents can keep their kids home if they're not comfortable. Well, what does that mean? Like, what does that mean theoretically, I love the idea, right? Like, people, the more flexibility we can provide families in this crazy time, the better. But at the same time, back to that whole, like, how do we create learning environments that actually are efficient and effective? I am very concerned about what Amy is bringing up in terms of the chaos that might create for a teacher, for a classroom, for a student. What about that student who's parents are comfortable for a couple weeks and then they're not, and then they are? Like, how do we create a framework that we can all kind of agree to ahead of time? And I've thought about that a little bit, and I think I'd suggest that we have people commit to a quarter.
I agree,
So-
some type of commitment so the teachers know what they're prepared, they can expect on a daily, weekly basis.
So a couple of different ways we can go about this, right?
Yeah.
There's a very intense deadline in the motion right now, right? That's driving a lot of this discussion, right? So like if the day is the 16th, right, we better have this figured out because it's going to have to be, I'm going to have to communicate this message tonight, right? Right. So if that's the way the vote goes, that gives a lot less time for the board to kind of like a quarter, whatever, that kind of thing. We're going to have to make some operational decisions basically immediately the second this meeting wraps. The members of the team that are still here are going to have to retire to another office and figure out how to communicate this message tonight and how it's going to work in the days that follow. And a quarter is one thing, but then you have the eventuality that the burden could fall, right? So there have to be some trip lines too. We have to figure out how it's going to be communicated to staff, the staff input piece, right? And there are people who will change their minds as this moves forward, right? So there's a bunch of factors at play here. And your point about how to operationalize this conceptually very good idea, it's well taken, right? Because the district is a very large entity with thousands of people who are deeply affected by our choices. Like it takes a minute to implement things like this.
Right.
Dan, I understand the deadline, the 16th, is a tough one. The 23rd would bring us up to Thanksgiving, give us probably, 2 days in, maybe 3. The 30th would probably be ideal, technically. I'm just...
Well, and remember too, Darren, that you guys have another board meeting on the 23rd, right? So there's time to talk and discuss. I mean, there's a motion on the floor, obviously.
Yeah, I understand that. With the motion.
I know I'm summarizing for myself. I'm sorry. So that'll have to be voted on. And if the motion passes, that creates one set of challenges for me and the team to figure out. And we'll do our best with it, right? Otherwise, like I hear a desire for this to be a standing item. And I would anticipate bringing back on the 23rd more details related to the dashboard, more operational considerations for how this would go. Plus, we would have another couple of checks of community burden to see if like we've peaked or we've plateaued or we're just exponentially climbing. Right? Because I would imagine it would matter to the board if the burden was substantially up on the 23rd from where it is today. Maybe not, but I would think people would care if it went up.
Yeah, it's just gravely concerning to hear that the health department can't even keep up with the contract.
Right.
I mean, so that means how many people are actually out there that we don't even know, that aren't even counted in the numbers that should be quarantining are not because they're not aware of it. I mean, that scares the heck out of me.
And it was also stated that if we do go back, then that responsibility then comes back to the district, and they were pretty tight, and kind of, sounds like barely hanging on before when our burden rate was a whole lot lower. So I'm very, very concerned about that.
I think Darren brings up a good point too. For me personally, I just think communication to staff, communication to family, decisions that are made. A week is a really short time frame. If you looked even at 2 weeks, I think why do something where then you have 2 days of school and then families are off for 5 days?
I'm fine with it.
And off having family gatherings. Yeah.
There's a lot of good pieces in this, Frank. I appreciate the
I totally agree. So I'm fine with like what Darren said, the 23rd or the 30th. It's just getting these kids into the school. That's all I'm saying.
Basically, just to give the administration and the educators, the teachers, more advanced knowledge. Frank, I like the 16th. I'm ready to get them back in school. Also, I see a lot of other stuff going out around in this state. So, a lot of people out there shopping, doing all their other things, blah, 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 but we're holding them back from school. And the people that want to go to school, let them come into school. The ones that don't, they can join in through a Zoom class or however it is, but administration, I leave that up to them, you know, because they're doing a great job the way they're doing it now. The educators are doing a great job with all their virtual learning. So I applaud everybody here. I applaud everybody in this room, but it's time, like you guys are saying, push that rock. Let's just budget at least a little bit. If it's a date we need to come up with, let's come up with a date then. I like the 16th, but I'm open to 23rd or 30th to give administration and staff time to get it all rolling.
I agree.
I guess there's still a few pieces to me. Like, I'm obviously better with giving some more time, but I also feel like there's a few pieces that I feel like I need an answer to, or what it will look like to completely commit to something, you know, as well. I don't know what the mechanism is to, I don't want to wait until just the 23rd to have the next discussion. I understand as a board, you can't just continue to meet and not have, you know, open sessions. What's the best way to continue this conversation from now until the 23rd?
Jane, I see some direction here, right? I see a desire from the board to get closer on what site-based dashboards look like for the schools, right? There's been substantial consideration on that, right? And there also seems to be substantial desire to work towards returning elementary kids with some options and parameters for families who aren't comfortable for that. Right. So those are decisions that affect several thousand people. Right. The board has adopted criteria in a couple of votes that have laid out some pretty firm parameters that this is a departure from, and that's going to take some time to plan and prepare for. Right. And to the points that a couple other board members have made, we don't know if we're in the middle of a spike, at the end of a spike, or we don't really know where we are right now, right? So it'll take a few minutes. There's a lot of desire from the board to talk about the most important issue facing the district whenever we are together, right? We have an impending holiday. Like, there's a bunch of different things coming together at once. I think plenty of people have noted that they see people going about their lives. I don't think we should expect the holiday to be the end of our challenges with COVID necessarily, right? So we have a bunch of stuff that we are working on, right? We're coming back in a couple of weeks to talk about it again. I mean, you can attach a deadline, but I would think the board would want to talk about that again, given whatever community health numbers come up. Like, I'm struggling here to articulate all the various points that everybody in this room has made here and kind of bring it together. And I realize that there's tremendous pressure and gravity to the decisions you're all making. I just want to make sure we're thoughtfully coming together around this, because I'm hearing a lot more unity in this room than we've had in some prior discussions on these subjects. I just want to make sure everybody's on the same page and we're doing it in a cautious and responsible way. So
I guess maybe I'd feel more comfortable committing to a date when we had some more of the details, like you said, that if it's something that administration works on over the next 2 weeks, and in that point we've got some additional data from the health department as far as burden, that
I think that's what he's saying, Wade.
Yeah.
I think what he's saying is that we could potentially allow the district to organize some materials and concepts and operational plans around the things we've discussed here today, and we can have a more detailed conversation, reviewing those things in writing instead of as concepts that we're floating to each other, and actually vote on something that's on paper that has and plan and have a little more time to work out the timing so that we're not rushing anyone into something that they're not ready to do successfully.
Right.
Well, that's why we should probably have a special meeting next Monday on the 16th then, instead of waiting 2 weeks. Because you wait 2 weeks to get it going. Now you're waiting another week or two to get the parents involved and everybody involved. Now you're another month out again. So you're past the 30th.
Right. But I think it probably even takes longer than a week to get some of this stuff together.
Well, we can at least get more information.
They're still having to do all the things they do just to get the education we have. So I'm comfortable with waiting till the 23rd to have this discussion, like Leah said, with a little bit more teeth. But I don't want to attach a date for return yet till I have some more of that data.
can I put in a couple 2 cents?
Sure.
I let Jane skip ahead of me, and then everyone skipped ahead of me. So I've been saving up. I've been scratching notes all night too, just so you know. But to Cheryl's point a while ago, where you didn't think it was the right time, and you still kind of touched on that again. I'm of the opinion that we might be coming up on the best time to try getting the kids back in school at the elementary level, especially because you've got 2 vacations coming up in the next 6 to 8 weeks. You got Thanksgiving break and you've got Christmas break. So if we put the elementary kids back in class, whether it's for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, gives Dan and the administration staff here time to see again, like I said before, what's working, what isn't working. You can tweak the plan during the break, come back and drop some stuff that's not working out at all. Add a few things that might help the plan or whatever you decide to do. So I think we're kind of in a unique spot here, I guess is the better way to put it, because after the Christmas break, then if you haven't had time to tweak anything we put in place, you're in school for 2 months and kind of whatever happens. You got to do it on the fly. This way it gives everybody some break time to figure out if the stuff we did decide to do is going to work, things to take out, things to put back in. So I think we're coming up on a good time to try to get the kids back in school and see if we can get something that's not going to be perfect, but it's going to work. Because I think that's what everybody in the room wants. Everyone would like to see a perfect plan, but we're never going to have one. We got to find something that's going to work. And it's going to be kind of a trial and error thing for a while. And I think everyone has to realize that. And we can't just keep bouncing around and keep waiting and waiting and waiting, because the longer you wait, the worse it is for the kids and worse it is for the families too. So, and I go back to my original statement. If you don't try something, you're not ever going to make any progress. So you have to be willing to try.
I would be interested to see, I mean, as long as we're throwing it out there, what it would look like district-wide and not just looking at elementary. I mean, if we're going to offer this option for elementary, why wouldn't we offer it to middle school and high school too?
Well, I was kind of thinking, excuse me, I don't know who I bumped into.
I'm sorry, Mark. I just have to say, like, I think you need to think. What I just think that I think you know the answer to that already, right? Which is, what is the outcome of opening the high school at a time when the community burden rate is what it is right now, right? What is the foreseeable result of that? Right. And I don't have a crystal ball, right? But I think there's a lot of COVID in the community right now. And given our discussion about contact tracing and what we know about how we cohort students, the highest probability for success is your elementary students. And tell me I'm wrong if I'm wrong. I'd happy to be wrong on this subject, right? But I think if you have 20 some elementary kids in a classroom and a number of them stay home because the board has reversed its prior position on burden rates and they choose to stay home because that's what they desire now, and we're going to attempt to support it technologically, despite your earlier point. I think that compounds as the kids get older, right? And you see what you see at a lot of comprehensive high schools throughout the region, where you get a lot of kids and a lot of teachers on quarantine, and that's where we find ourselves. Maybe, maybe not, but I think that's the reason why some people in the room have proposed we start with elementary, where we have the greatest probability of success.
I would love to be there at some point, Amy, but I do agree that I think we need to start somewhere, and I think the elementary area is the easiest based on cohorts, not moving classes. And to Mark's point, is there learning from that, and can we pivot to a model that looks similar at the other two? But I think we've got to start somewhere at a bite and kind of go from there.
Well, excuse me a second, Dan. Kind of concluded from what Amy was saying, though, if that iPad process that you were saying at the high school level, we're doing a hybrid model, our classrooms would be actually a lot smaller because a lot more people would probably want to stay home if that's to choose, but the ones that want to go in, they can go in. I'm just saying the classroom size at the middle school and the high school would be a lot smaller with that process that Amy was talking about, utilizing the iPad process that you were saying on a hybrid model in the beginning.
I think that if we could support it at the elementary school, the probability of being able to support it in several hundred more classrooms would increase. And given that we've used it in a very limited basis with kids who were quarantined during a 3-week period of time is very different than it being something that we're using in every single classroom in a district. It's just a very different thing. Right? I don't want to see you do something that collapses in on itself immediately, right? That said, we will work to implement whatever vision the board wants to bring forward, but that has some inherent challenges in it. It might be, to Mark's earlier point, right? You might want to see how it works with the group where we have had the most success already and where we've observed the most success throughout the region and state.
I'd be willing, obviously, to redo my motion to the 23rd or the 30th on the elementary level. Oh, I know it wasn't. I'm saying I would be willing to change it to start amended to the 23rd or the 30th. If you guys are willing
I was trying to sum up before, like if you alternatively would like to direct the team to bring you an updated dashboard and an updated implementation plan for consideration on the 23rd, that's an option that I'd heard batted around the room too.
Yeah, I'm more comfortable with that. I'm not comfortable with setting a date for going back until we have some information concrete in front of us that we can look at, not this conceptual stuff that's out there. I want to be able to look at something and like talk about it before we set a date to come back.
Right, me too.
So on the 23rd, hypothetically, if you were all agreed to site-based dashboards throughout the district for elementary, you're willing to start on the 30th then? I just want to make sure that's clear.
No, their answer is no.
I don't know. I would have to, I guess I'd want to know how fast they could turn it around. I'd want to know what our burden rate is. So for myself, I can't commit to a date at this time until I see what the district is proposing and to see what our burden rate is at that time.
Leave your motion the way it is, Frank.
Any other discussion? Okay, we'll take a vote. Roll call. Jane?
Not with the 16th.
Okay.
No.
Cheryl?
I dissent.
Okay, Darren?
Yes.
Amy?
No.
Leah?
No.
Mark?
Yes.
I'm a yes. So, matter if we change it to a different motion, obviously using a date.
I'd like to make a motion that we allow the district to provide us with a written report of their plan based on our discussions tonight at our next meeting. And we can discuss the possibility of a motion to return at that time. I don't even know if we really need a motion for that, but that's where I'd like to see us put.
Just a request.
Make a motion to put this on the next on this and every other agenda, so that we can have a discussion, so we can plan, so we can talk.
So for a start, Leah's original motion, right? I just want to make sure I got this written down, right? It's hard when everyone's talking. Direct administration to provide a written report based on tonight's discussion at our November 23rd meeting for future consideration.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Any other discussion?
I honestly don't know if that requires a motion.
Yeah.
Legally, I don't really know that we need to vote on it. I just wanted to formalize my suggestion.
Request. Thank you, Leah.
I'm really not, I'm clear, I guess, but so if we get a report from Dan on the 23rd, and a similar thing turns up with COVID by then, whether it's negative or positive, or whether it's a burden rate. So there's still no guarantee that some of the people in the room here are willing to put our kids back in school, because it seems to me that everyone just wants to keep the discussion going, which is a good thing. But when is the discussion end, and when do we take some action? That's what I want to know, because we can talk and talk and talk. We can waste another 5 or 10 meetings. Not that it's not a serious thing to be talking about, but sooner or later, we're going to have to decide if we're going to move forward or if we're going to just keep talking.
Well, I think we said that. I think we all agreed that discussion on the 23rd could potentially lead to opening schools as soon as the 30th in the elementary.
I mean, I think all I can guarantee is I'm comfortable in making a decision on the 23rd when I have something about, all the things we talked about tonight really put into a plan.
Well, if that's the case, then it should appear on the agenda as an action item again. Correct?
No, correct, Mark. No, the way I understood it, and please, can I just speak without a lot of other people talking at once? Okay. The way I understood it was we come back on the 23rd. I noticed it just like I noticed tonight as an action item, and we have some reports and the updated dashboard, basically like Leah said, to reflect the conversation all of you have had. The team can go back and listen to this. It's 9:21 right now. We can listen to this discussion and figure out where everybody was, bring it back forward as an action item.
Yeah, so I was under the impression if it's going to come back as a discussion item, we're just going to talk about it and no action will be taken again until the numbers or whatever get to where everyone likes them, and I'd like it to be an action item. If it comes back, it's got to be an action item. So we have a definite date where we know when we're going to try sending the kids to school or not. Because if we come back the 23rd, decide the 30th or the 8th or whatever, that's why I'd like to see it as an action item. So,
But Dan, do you need 2 weeks to put it all together, or could you put it together within this week to have a special meeting on the 16th? Just asking. I don't want to pull your hair out. I know I don't want to pull your hair out, but
Darren, I'll do whatever I'm directed to do, and the team will work however hard they have to work to do it. It's just like the board together, considering all these different things they've talked about, like what's practical and reasonable, what makes the most sense for all of us. Like we'll continue to do whatever we can to move whatever mountains in front of us.
It sounds like you have some kind of site-based dashboard for the schools almost ready, but you just haven't implemented them. Well, I seen that one, but that's not broken down to, like he's saying, with having the teachers and the staff coming in. If someone goes out or sick or missing, they want to see all this in writing, basically.
Right, they want to see it all in writing. What I did earlier in the evening was conceptualize what you see on a bunch of other districts that have site-based dashboards that did site-based instead of district-wide, like we did.
So we're going to give you basically, because the girls, well, I'm just going to say it because it's true, they want to sit here till the 23rd and wait till the next meeting instead of coming in on the 16th. Next Monday as a special meeting. Because I'm open for a special meeting. The more we talk about it, instead of going 2 weeks with nothing to the community, I don't think that's fair to them.
We're not going with nothing. We're giving the district time to develop a thoughtful process and spend the time that it needs to be done. So
I understand that.
There was also a little bit of discussion about people still having concerns about what the health department had shared and the current state of the burden rate. And I noted 2 or 3 people who said something about like waiting to see where we were in the spike, whether it was the end or the beginning or what. So I think it's more than just the time needed to flip the switch, communicate, flesh out the plan, bring something forward. I think there's a little bit of trepidation based on like the amount of COVID in the community too. So I think it's a couple of factors.
agreed.
Okay.
And Dan, all due respect to Darren's comments, I think he was just trying to be respectful in the time about.
No, of course he was.
So that's why he asked about the special meeting, which I understand. I understand.
I know you guys are pulling your hair out now the way it is. Everyone is. The parents are. You are. Administration, teachers. I understand that. You know, this is about the kids and everyone, all in one for the city of Oak Creek. And the sooner we can try to attempt to get at least elementary to start in, I think it's a win-win for everybody. But to keep, I'm not going to say dragging it on, but wait 2 weeks every time. Sometimes we don't even bring it up at a meeting. That's kind of frustrating because this is what I hear from other residents and people that have kids in school. You didn't even talk about it. Well, that wasn't the time it was talked about. It was on the agenda. It was, you know. So I just like the community to be up there. I know they can look at the website and all that stuff, but they actually want to see us in this room, basically the war room, and freaking hashing it out and trying to get something accomplished that's positive to try to move forward. You know what I'm saying? Because sitting at home with these kids, you know, for a lot of parents that are, like Frank mentioned earlier, K4, kindergarten, first, second, those kids really don't have a clue on to run these Chromebooks or iPads, you know, with the mute button. That's exactly what it was. You got to go outside and take pictures of stuff and do stuff for activities for class. That's tough when you got 2 kids at home, maybe even 3, and they're all doing something different for parents. And that's where the stress comes in on the parents. And that's why all this mental health and everything is playing into it that you guys don't know about truly, you know, because these parents are at home pulling their hair out, going 3 different directions. They have 3 kids in elementary or less. And then the high school parents, they're pulling their hair out because their kids are laying in bed in their pajamas doing their schoolwork, and it's not a good environment for them to learn anything, or they doze off or whatever they do, or take their thing and they block their camera view so the teacher don't know what they're doing. So I just want to try to do something for these children of the city and these families that get these kids back in school. And I understand how dangerous COVID is. I work at the VA hospital, so I take precaution every day. And if people take precaution every day, you know, do what they're told, you know, I think it'd be okay. You know, I can't talk for the 35,000, 37,000 people in Oak Creek, but something happened where they got COVID. You know, something went wrong. They weren't listening to CDC. I don't know what they were doing, but something happened for that. But there's a majority of the people out there that want to get their kids back in school. Thank you guys for letting me vent.
Dan, on that meeting, I know obviously we're going to still talk about the elementary. I still want to talk about the middle school and high school also.
No, of course, Frank, you can bring up whatever you want.
But
So did Leah have a motion on the table?
there's really no motion. She just requested something.
Not,
I'm not sure that it's actually appropriate.
I can't hear you.
It's not really a motion.
I don't know that in Robert's Rules of Order, a suggestion for a topic for the next meeting requires a motion. So I would not fight against the process to get my motion seconded. I think I've made my suggestion clear, and if we need a motion to move forward out of this conversation, then by all means, feel free to second.
I'll second that, just because I think it would be good for us to have it on record that that we want to keep moving and that we want to keep this as an agenda item for the foreseeable future. So I second it. I can't hear you. Sorry.
Okay, so just to sum
I
up,
think you're changing things.
just to sum up, can I just try to keep us organized here? So Leah moved and then discussed at length, directed administration to provide a written report based on the discussion tonight at our November 23rd meeting for future consideration. Cheryl, would you like to second that motion?
I would like to second that motion.
Okay.
Any discussion? Okay, roll call, Jane.
Yes.
Cheryl?
Yes.
Darren?
Yes.
Amy?
yes.
Leah?
Yes.
Mark?
Yep.
The only thing I want to say before I take my vote, I do agree with Darren that I wish it was earlier so we can get these kids in quicker before the 23rd, so I'll say yes. Any other questions? Okay, motion to adjourn.
Well, hold on. Do we need to do anything to request that discussions around school reopening and processes be a standing item, or has it already been decided?
No, and I mean, like, you're certainly revisiting it at our next scheduled meeting. So if you feel that's necessary to add at that meeting, you can do it at that time. Or just the discussion reflected that the board definitely wants to discuss the most important issue of the district at subsequent board meetings, as long as that endures. So I don't think you need a motion. I know everyone agrees to that. So it's nice that we have two kind of unanimous consensus items here tonight. I know this is like high emotion, a lot of tension and stuff, but we're moving forward, and it's unfortunate that like our numbers continue to climb in Oak Creek. I don't think any of you anticipated that continuing to happen, but I still think the group, I want to applaud the group for being so collaborative and productive tonight, and let's see where we get.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Cerniglia moves to adjourn.
Small, second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Thank you for attending. Have a good night.